I was up to my elbows in paperwork when I got the call. Somebody had been offed. Only this time, there were no witnesses. Only stray wires and a hollowed box. Video games were dead. And it was up to me to figure out who did it. Luckily, the mocha pot tastes best after midnight. I once read in a poem that April was the cruelest month. Guess I'd always thought of myself as somewhat of an optimist. That we'd live in a modern-day renaissance of interactivity. But who was I kidding? Hope is an illusion we keep telling ourselves. The signs were always there. We just ignored them and bought whatever was hot. I stare into the cup of blood-black nothing and see only the spoon that once was held by the hand that gripped the controller. Since when had all the bodies of Blu-rays and V-Bucks been piling up so high? I don't know anymore. I don't know. All I have with me is a feeling, an intuition, a whisper to follow the money, a single lead and the usual suspects. Let's hope this time it'll be enough. Hop in the car, rookie. You're on the case. It's time for a save room murder mystery. April 9th, 2024, Portland, Oregon. The streets are ablaze with discourse soaked in diesel distracting me from the bodies tossed out in the gutters and alleys of an emaciated industry. How's an average Joe like me supposed to follow their nose when all that smells is the constant decay of corporate corruption? It's all the same anyway. No matter what I do, the bodies come back. They always come back. So here I am, at the scene of the crime, wondering if this time I end up just like them. Where there's smoke, there's fire, and no one's burning more victims quite like our first suspect, Embracer Group. 2023 was a great year for video games. If you're a consumer existing solely in the isolation of product consumption, that is. But if you've got even a fingernail on the pulse of the industry, you'd be hard-pressed to feel even a single beat amidst the thousands of layoffs that gutted countless jobs, impacting nearly every studio. Numbers so absurdly high, we needed stark reminders of how impactful the job cuts were. Not just from journalists and news outlets, but from developers and actors hired to voice characters in the games themselves.
I think it's not a great year for video games insofar as all of the layoffs. I think it's not great for that, and I think that does need to be spoken about at an event like this.
On the floors of Blood Meridian carpet is where screams ring the loudest. PC Gamer estimates that the number of devs laid off in 2023 was around 11,250 people. Think about that number. Try to visualize it. 11,000 people. Where would you put them? I'll tell you right now, not even the top 5 theaters on Broadway combined could hold all those developers. You'd have to size up to a stadium, the likes of which not even some of France, Germany, China, Korea, Italy, Australia, Canada, or US Open tennis stadiums could even house. Too many bodies. Current estimates from Game World Observer as of April 1st already put the number of layoffs for 2024 somewhere around 9,000 people. 9,000 in just 3 months. Altogether, we're packing the entirety of the O2 Arena in London. We still have the rest of the year to go. It's easy to blame Embracer for killing games, or at least catchy to pin it on one entity.
And number 2 is the Embracer Group is here.
After all, Wired calls them the poster child for the struggles of acquisition.
They've really fucked this place up, haven't they? It's fucking crazy.
They've spent so much money buying studios only to turn around and either eviscerate development teams or sell studios back out for a fraction of the price. All in an attempt to make spreadsheets look nicer. The problem is not that the games industry isn't profitable, it's still raking in tons of cash, but that it isn't growing. No growth means no rise in stock price. No rise in stock price means unhappy investors, and we simply can't have that. To please investors is to make the lines go up at any cost. And firing people is the most obvious answer, as people are seen as a number equivalent to the sum of a studio's overall cost. Doesn't matter who you are or how beneficial you've been to the team, you just so happen to land on the end of a difficult decision. Luckily, it seems like Embracer is finally waking up to its millions of dollars of miscalculations. Ash Parrish at The Verge reports on Embracer Group CEO Lars Wingfors' recent enlightenment. A new strategy in place. Quote, simply making better products and games. In the words of Ash Parrish, no shit, dude. But even if Embracer is seemingly set to backtrack on all its acquisitions and volatile spending, the overall practice is still indicative of a larger parasite in play across many publishers. The obsession with an imaginary, forever uptrending line on a graph is a fool's game. A lie you are only telling yourself. Why are the faults by the circle of suits at the top made at the expense of the worker just trying to make a game? Why do their mistakes fall on victimless shoulders? Just recently, EA reported record profits, reaching an enormous net booking for Q3 fiscal year 2024 of $2,366 million. Their response? Cutting 670 people. Does this really foster a healthy work environment? When developers who made the cut are scared they or someone from their team could be next, just so the books can make a couple of extra bucks? Of course not. Will CEOs ever prioritize maintaining stability across their teams by sacrificing a small portion of their salary? Why would they? GameSpot's article on industry layoffs by Phil Hornshaw, which I highly recommend reading, details a theory by tech industry commentator and EasyPR CEO Ed Zitron. He calls it the rot economy, a system that favors the appearance of growth over business being healthy and sustainable. And this isn't just true for games, by the way. Take a look outside and you'll see what's happening with Boeing, or by cutting costs and ignoring safety concerns by workers is actively leading to planes breaking apart in the sky. Oh, and that ship that crashed into the Baltimore Bridge? The company that runs the cargo ship, Maersk, they too were sanctioned for silencing whistleblowers for reporting unsafe working conditions. Death at the expense of the worker and the civilian. All in the pursuit of infinite profit. Rot economy. Obviously, this has impacted game development as well. In our previous cases, we've already talked about how the Insomniac leaks gave us insight into how ballooning budgets is creating an environment of unsustainability. It is insane to think Spider-Man 2 cost $300 million to make and somehow still released without the level of polish of previous Insomniac titles and with forced compromises in narrative set-piece design. Leaks suggest Insomniac had much loftier ambitions with how the Spider-Men would fight villains across New York. There are traces of it with certain encounters, like the lizard fight, but nothing truly substantial. Arbitrary timelines and that rising cost meant that they had to release an inferior product too soon for shelves. We paid full retail price for a vision that had to be changed. And it still sold 10 million copies. It became PlayStation's fastest selling game ever. And do you know how Insomniac were rewarded? Layoffs. And not just layoffs, but unprecedented layoffs. As in, they weren't the studio used to doing this kind of thing. Side note, ever wonder why pacing and set pieces take a hit after the Bahamut fight in Final Fantasy XVI? Square told Creative Business Unit 3 they had to rein it in. The game was getting too big and too expensive. And while the game, in the end, supposedly met Square's sales expectations, the team has already been disbanded. And it wasn't just Insomniac who was forced to cut members of its staff, but 900 people across all of SIE. Guerrilla and Naughty Dog were hit too. When not even your most critically acclaimed and commercially successful studios are safe, then what chance do any other developers at any other studios have? I'll clue you in. They don't. I worry about the state of the industry. It's a vicious cycle we're seeing ourselves get stuck in. Sven Vinke, head of Larian Studios, made this observation at this year's Game Developers' Choice Awards.
Same mistakes over and over and over, and it's always the quarterly profits. The only thing that matters is the numbers, and then you fire everybody, and then like next year you're going to say, shit, I'm out of developers, and you're going to start hiring people again, and then you do acquisitions, and then you put them in the same loop again, and it's just being broken and broken and broken. You don't have to.
And he's right. If we're only ever worried about the numbers, it'll eventually lead to inferior games. Not that there won't be any games, of course, but that severe compromises across the board will have to be made. Scope, narrative ambition, design, all of it. And if you're a developer, you'll be lucky if you even get to ship a title. It's no wonder devs had to come together at this year's GDC to let out a collective, cathartic scream. They're tired, and we should be too. How will games be made if no one wants to stick around as a developer? Who would want to stick around at a job that might throw you away at the drop of a hat? Who would want to slave away at a trend-chasing project they're forced to make in an industry that actively rejects passion projects? And if you don't want to hear it from me, hear it from IGN's investigative reporter, Rebecca Valentine, in an interview with Alyssa Chang from NPR's All Things Considered.
A lot of companies are just spending and spending and spending in these very big ways. When you combine all of that together, you end up with this climate where everything just feels very unstable and very unsafe for the people who are actually doing the work of making video games and not making the choices of where the money goes and how it's used. I think this has been a wake-up call for a lot of people in realizing that this thing that they love to do and are very good at, making games, is maybe not a place that they're able to retire in, and I don't know that we have a solution for that yet.
All signs were pointing to the continued gutting of studios. Countless people all crying out to the apathetic void of our late-stage capitalistic dystopia we call art and entertainment. But it went further. A metastasized leech below the layers of rot. A symptom of a much larger cause. No, it couldn't have been the layoffs. The voice in the dark shouting at me to follow the money pointed to something much bigger. An infestation so large we'd have to step back just to even see it. A silent killer. Organized crime hidden in the shadows of live service. I was looking down the barrel of a smoking gun loaded with cosmetic bullets, and every man, woman, and child was holding the trigger. I like Fortnite. I like their approach to chapter content with continuous updates throughout a season that keeps hopping in for a few rounds of zero build, consistently fresh for weeks on end. One week, the Ninja Turtles and Donatello's hoverboard might show up. The next, a quarter of the map is taken over by Greek gods, and I'm dashing around the sky with wings. It's dumbass fun, man. And its free-to-play nature mixed with exciting collabs means I'm more than willing to hand over my wallet for a couple of V-Bucks in order to get skins like Fushiguro from Jujutsu Kaisen. Epic has labeled me a mark, and they're right to do so. But there's no denying the impact Fortnite has had on the industry hasn't been a good one. Live service is an endemic we've all allowed to feed off the games industry as a socially accepted leech. We've all heard the shouts. It's just cosmetics. If it doesn't affect gameplay, who cares? A skin isn't hurting anyone. I look around at the pile of canceled games, transformed franchises, and abandoned projects to see, really, it was hurting all of us. Take a look at Suicide Squad, the latest game by Rocksteady as an example. After 3 highly successful single-player, story-focused Batman games, they disappeared for nearly 9 years, only to come back with a live service title so uninspired, so devoid of engaging content, that it didn't matter if the game was set in the Arkham universe or even included iconic heroes from the Justice League. It both underwhelmed in terms of sales expectations and underperformed with critics. The absolute gall to release the first seasonal content update since launch, only to include no new story missions and double down on grind to unlock the promised character of the Joker. Oh, but if you want to skip that, You can just buy Joker with real-world money, of course. But Rocksteady get to get away with it, because they know people can and will choose to spend money on the game in lieu of grinding. They're banking on you to pony up for the Joker and save a bit of time, and hey, maybe some of those extra skins that caught your eye in the store. Warner Brothers doesn't care about the narrative quality of a game. They just want to know if they have teams with the capabilities of turning their established IPs into monetary cash cows. It's why, despite Hogwarts Legacy outselling Call of Duty to become the highest grossing game of 2023, future installments will likely be live service. Because according to WB, selling 20 million copies of a game is just, quote, too volatile. Rather than have teams create art, they want to create worlds for us to live and work and build and play in. Endless engagement, endless mindshare, endless revenue. In an industry that is obsessed with the concept of growth, it's no wonder countless titles have reworked themselves in order to fit the mold of a genre whose aim is only that of constant revenue. It doesn't matter if the square peg won't fit the round hole, if a couple of players are willing to spend hard-earned dollars on making the peg look like Nicki Minaj or Paul Atreides or, hey, Cheech and fucking Chong. In a society of fandoms and pop culture potpourri, we're all the marks. Let's face it, battle passes are no less a predatory design than the now shelved loot boxes of yestergeneration. Companies work at exploiting FOMO. They entice you with free rewards and a peek at what you can unlock in the hopes that you'll shell out some of your money. If everyone else has a cool skin and funny emote in the lobby, you're already having less fun than you could be having if you just spent a couple bucks. And no one likes a default skin. It's genius. They've built self-sustaining marketing aimed to squeeze out a few extra dollars from both adults and impressionable children. Pay attention where all the eye-popping cereal is placed next time you're in the grocery store. And hey, mom and dad, the V-Bucks are right next to you at the register. It's all psychological warfare in the end. But the effects of live service go beyond battle passes and design reworks. Even single-player experiences aren't privy to the corporate pop-up shops of needless microtransactions. Yeah, we laugh at the stupidity of horse armor and Oblivion from nearly 20 years ago, but the practice has only become more prolific. Just recently, Dragon's Dogma 2 was hit with a wave of negativity and public outlash due to Capcom's insertion of microtransactions for in-game items. These items for sale included Rift Crystals, currency used to rent out pawns from beyond the Rift. The Art of Metamorphosis, an item used to modify your character's appearance. Camping kits, gear used to build campsites while out exploring. The Makeshift Jail Key, a one-time use key used to escape the confines of a jail cell. Port crystals, used for setting down a warp point for future fast travel. And much more. While all of these only cost between $2 and $3, it was easy to see why the outcry was so loud upon release. On the surface, it looks like Capcom is leveraging microtransactions by paywalling quality of life systems found in most RPGs behind a real-world storefront. Of course, the reality is that Dragon's Dogma 2's design wasn't actually compromised to make way for microtransactions. It's just more of a hardcore RPG. Fast travel is a sparse resource and managed through collecting harder-to-come-by fairy stones. The developers actually want you engaging with the world by traveling on foot or by ox cart. Camping kits are ubiquitously found while exploring or shopping around the town. An early quest and attentive sleuthing will give you not one, but 2 jail keys, the superior version of the makeshift jail key that grants the player unlimited uses throughout the game. Uncompromised design. Capcom has done this before with previous titles. But the problem? Who cares if you can ignore them? These shouldn't exist in single-player games. In a master's thesis at the Copenhagen Business School by Marius Patrick Dijkshoek and Patrick Tronier, the 2 candidates discussed the implications monetization strategies have on the video game industry. In one word, malpractice. Just because in-game items for sale for real-world dollars are superfluous doesn't mean they can't be leveraged in a game's design to encourage being bought by players. Let's look at our good old friend Warner Brothers, who already apologized for the use of extortion in Middle-earth: Shadow of War with a microtransaction that allowed players to skip the grind that unlocked the ending of the game's narrative. Yet here they are again, doing this same thing with Joker. These games aren't free. We already spent money on them. Stop. When the chance to make more money is on the line, publishers will always try again. And sure, there are examples of live service games that get it right. I'm looking at you, Helldivers 2. But there's always going to be exceptions to the rule. Whether it's skins, battle passes, or microtransactions, publishers will always attempt to design around our wallets. As games continue to contort around live service elements in pursuit of profit, the onus will be on us to disengage. Honestly, we have to ask ourselves, is the intrinsic value of spending a few extra bucks for an emote dopamine rush really worth more than the sanctitude of experience a game as an artistic medium? Sure, that sounds sort of highbrow for games that are meant to be laughed at in a party with friends. But I promise you, the team of marketing strategists are the ones always getting the last laugh. We cannot keep excusing psychological strategies to sneak hands into our pockets from corporate big brothers if we ever want to view games as an art form that should be considered seriously. Games are not just a business. We can worry about publisher strategies only after we've thought about them as an experience with something to say. If we ever want to think about them critically, then we have to acknowledge them as an aesthetic endeavor before anything else, and especially before a product. Turns out, role-playing in the ruins of interplanetary capitalism wasn't just the selling point of hit indie game Citizen Sleeper. It was the moniker to the future of our industry. If we continue to view games as products and players as consumers, then games are already as good as dead. In the end, it was only my wallet they were ever after. Still, a mountain of cash wouldn't explain the bodies of DualSense and Xbox controllers littering the streets. It had to go further. Corruption beyond the hands of suit and ties, reaching out for their share of the pie. There were fingerprints at the scene, but too many to isolate. Duplicitous deception made to get me to bark up the wrong tree. A calculated setup of monotony and premeditation. An inside job. But who? Damn it, who? When was the last time an original IP was the best-selling game in a given year? Take some time and think about it. Tell you what, I'll even give you a hint. It was a Nintendo game. You got the answer? It was We Play, a party game from 2008. It was the top-selling video game with 5.2 million copies in sales. In fact, Wii games dominated 4 of the top 5 spots that year, with Mario Kart, Wii Fit, and Smash Bros. Brawl respectively in the numbers 2, 3, and 4 spots. However, if you were to try and look for another example of original IP taking the best-selling spot, you'd have to go all the way back to 1993. Mortal Kombat on the Sega Genesis. Before that, it's all 80s, with games like the original Legend of Zelda, Super Mario Bros., Pac-Man, and Space Invaders. Sequels sell. We are naturally drawn to familiarity. Can you guess, say, in the last 15 years, how many times a Call of Duty game was the best-selling title? It's not 5 or 10, but 12 times. If you aren't a Call of Duty game, the top spot is either a Rockstar game or Harry Potter. It's no wonder you get comments such as, "Gaming is dying." According to the numbers, the majority of people have been literally playing the same games for over 10 years. And it's these kinds of statistics that start to make gaming in general start to make more sense. There are no more video game genres. If you're not a first-person shooter, it's all the same homogenized design systems and mechanics popularized by the action-adventure games of PS3, Xbox 360 era Ubisoft. towers that unlock map markers, waypoints, and streamlined quests. Endless objective lists made to pad out game time with no meaningful interactivity. Are we really role-playing in curated worlds? Or are we simply logging on for more AAA, publisher-safe, glorified work? From the outside looking in, it's no wonder gaming can look stale. For a more complete dissection of Ubisoft's approach to games, I highly recommend one of the latest videos by Racevic, which I'll leave down in the description below. Monoculture isn't uniquely a video game problem. Up until about 2020, it was Marvel Studios that had a chokehold on cinema and the overall pop culture zeitgeist. It's a tired example, especially on sites like Twitter, but Martin Scorsese captured Hollywood's problem with monoculture by using Marvel as a dominant example. In an op-ed with the New York Times, Scorsese explains that the issue wasn't solely that he didn't think Marvel movies were art, rather that the prevalence of them set a dangerous precedent. Suddenly, you have movie theaters who are only willing to play the same kind of movies because they're the one kind of movie that brings in the most money. And Hollywood studios become only concerned with making comic book movies because they draw the biggest appeal, and thus the biggest box office. Where then does this place smaller projects? Forget indies for a second. What about the mid-budget movie? If you can even get financing to get a picture played, chances are you're lucky if you even get one of the bigger screens. And so, you get the same type of movies made over and over again. As Scorsese notes, and if you're going to tell me that it's simply a matter of supply and demand and giving the people what they want, I'm going to disagree. It's a chicken and egg issue. If people are given only one kind of thing and endlessly sold only one kind of thing, of course, they're only going to want more of that one kind of thing. This is monoculture. Time will tell if the Barbenheimer effect prevails and we start getting major motion picture blockbusters made for adults back into the mainstream. Denis Villeneuve, director of movies like Dune Part 2, Blade Runner 2049, Arrival, and Prisoners, isn't all that optimistic. In an interview with Time magazine, he says, "We're in a very conservative time. Creativity is restricted. Everything's about Wall Street. What will save cinema is freedom and taking risks. And you feel the audience is excited when they see something they haven't seen before. In the end, it's always about the money." Gaming is sort of in that same spot. There's a chokehold on what type of games get made and to what extent experimentation in any genre can be designed. Red Dead Redemption 2, despite its intentional design around slowness, wanting players to roleplay and feel like Arthur through heavy movement and slow burn narrative pacing, is ultimately still a game designed around mass market appeal. High action shootouts, simplistic quest design, main and side objective markers on a minimap. Of course, this doesn't mean RDR2 is bad by any means. It's actually one of the greatest narratives ever in a video game. Simply that the elements in the minute-to-minute gameplay are less than inspired design. And let's face it, without the strong narrative pillar like in Red Dead Redemption, even the prettiest of RPGs can be left feeling uninspired, underwhelming, and straight up generic. Look, if even third-party developers are frequently developing games with risk aversion at the forefront of design, then what hope do we have for first-party AAA titles? I primarily play games on a PlayStation. You can call me a Sony pony, but I tend to lean toward third-person, narrative-focused games. PlayStation Studios has that in spades. But there's also no denying that The Last of Us back in 2013 was a fundamental shift in the console's ecosystem. Suddenly, most first-party games have to be giant-budget, pretty graphic, elevated narrative games that take way too many years to make. And while, yeah, the games are all largely good, there's less room for the smaller, weirder titles Sony spent years building their identity on. It's a shame that Sony closed down London Studio in its entirety when much of PlayStation's cultural cachet is rooted in the UK's underground scene of the 2000s. If it weren't for Astrobot or Returnal, would there really be a unique and exciting reason to buy a PS5? I'm not so sure. And I'll level with you. Not every game has to be top to bottom, totally revolutionary. Alan Wake 2 leveraged familiarity with survival horror tropes and gameplay mechanics to tell an ambitious and layered story. It didn't need to reinvent the wheel here. But these examples are really just rare outliers. We don't get many titles fighting against the norm. Otherwise, would they even sell that well? Compromises must always be made. So, what are we left here? When our options are sequels to established IP or games that take heavy design inspiration from successful titles, are we really ever playing anything new? Not really. Most of what's on the front page of storefronts are games over-designed and endlessly derivative of what's marketable, what's been proven commercially, and what's been lauded critically. Games are continuously pulling from the same inspirations over and over again, leaving little room for innovation. The industry becomes a breeding ground for games focus tested solely for mass appeal. Identity is smudged until it's hardly even recognizable. Yeah, sometimes aesthetics and narrative devices may differ, but the moment-to-moment language always stays the same. We don't really care about new things after all. New IP always has to be as Souls-like. It has to be over-the-shoulder action-adventure with Hollywood-budget cinematics. A streamlined RPG. Not even Judas, the upcoming game from Ken Levine, can escape comparisons to a game from 2007. 17 years later, and here we are. New IP distilled down to one single marketable phrase that makes the rounds online. BioShock in space. Are there even any comedy games out there? High on Life has comedic elements, sure, but the language is still just point A to point B, first-person shooter. In the end, really, it's all just the same. The death of genre and the death of games. Every step further took me 2 steps back. These guys were good, but I was getting close to cracking the case. I could feel it. It's like the answer was right there in front of my face. Unless... No. It couldn't be. No! Over the last several years, I've noticed a steady change in our relationship with games. Specifically, how we play them and how we talk about them online. We're always eagerly awaiting the next big thing, while forever at the detriment of what's already in front of us. Do we ever really pause and reflect on games as art? Or do we simply treat games like an event to attend for a weekend before pre-ordering whatever's on the horizon? Frankly, this puts games in a precarious position where they have to be entertaining enough to become a hot trend, but insightful enough so as to not fall off after a busy weekend. And it's this toxic maelstrom of engagement we've formed that'll end up hurting us in the end. We've fallen on our own sword. Let's take a look at the Game Awards as an example. The so-called biggest night in video game celebration.
I'm Jeff Keighley, and welcome to the Game Awards in Fortnite.
Which should be an event that celebrates all the blood, sweat, and tears that go into development of a title, where developers are celebrated and platformed to give speeches, are reduced to scattered moments of rushed in and out stage time meant to cushion blocks of ads and trailers, where industry icons are told to please wrap it up. A glorified commercial event guised as prestigious ceremony. And it's not like I'm saying there's anything wrong with being excited for upcoming titles. I'm eagerly awaiting getting my hands on Death Stranding 2 and staring at a big-ass moon while I make deliveries with Sam Porter Bridges. But it's that we've allowed hype culture to invade that which should be the least bit sanctimonious. This year, the Academy introduced each Best Acting nominee at the Oscars with long, beautiful individual speeches. Actors each got their respective due. A moment to spotlight their talent and hard work. When Lupita Nyong'o introduced Divine Joy Randolph, she told a story about how Divine used glasses from her grandmother during the filming for her role in The Holdovers, and how beautiful it was to see the world
through her eyes and yours.
It was a touching moment. So, when Divine took the stage to accept her award, She didn't just have ample time to deliver one of the most heartwarming speeches of the night. She was given context with sincerity. She was praised, awarded, and most importantly, humanized. When was the last time we did that for developers? If not even our biggest award show gives time for individuals to discuss the process of making art over the better part of 3, 4, sometimes 5+ years, let alone to relate to us on a human level, then why would any one person watching at home treat developers with the same level of care throughout the rest of the year? But that's what this industry does. Developers are only worth as much as their ability to be commercialized by the products they make. Shut up and sit down. Maybe the next trailer for Grand Theft Auto 6 is up next. But the real issue is how hype culture is actively working against what many games are currently asking of players: to engage with systems on a deeper level. Recent discourse over Dragon's Dogma 2 labeled this engagement as friction. Paul Tassi at Forbes writes about how Dragon's Dogma consistently introduces systems that work against the player, and how this tension is leveraged to create a fun, unique gameplay experience that stands out against its peers. Others on podcasts detail the gameplay as that of fantasy that's hardcore. And while there is a level of obfuscation in play with Dragon's Dogma's design, I'd argue the bar of engagement has been steadily getting lower and lower, that any game that isn't explicitly guiding your hand is now seen as a point of tension. Do you remember how irked some people got by the "if Ubisoft made Elden Ring" meme? Has the bar really been lowered so far that requiring intentional focus is now seen as hardcore? Have we really been so conditioned by homogeneity that even the slightest level of engagement is seen as too much? How long have we been treading shallow water, man? I worry for us that our capacity for engagement is always distilled. That when a game aims to try something new with its approach to narrative by challenging our expectations, our response is to vilify it as either too weird or too confusing and downright offensive. This is what art does. It's provocative and begs question from those who are experiencing it. If we don't want games to sublimate into a passive experience we play for mindless pleasure, then the onus is going to be on us to treat them with the level of care they deserve. It doesn't matter if gaming is still in its artistic infancy. Critical thinking shouldn't be an opinion we steal from a headline, but a thought we formulate through thumbsticks and triggers. And if we're not doing that, then I'm sorry, but gaming is already dead. So who did it? Was it Ubisoft? Was it Embracer? Maybe Fortnite or us? Fact is, it was nobody. Gaming faked their own death. The chalk lines and puddles of blood-soaked pixels shape themselves into a rudimentary mirror of ray-traced self-reflection. Gaming ain't dead, but it is hanging on in quiet desperation. If we keep going this way, we might just be the ones to help it let go. And if we want to avoid holding on to any guilt, then we have to change the way we consume games. To experience it, to nurture it, to slow down and admire that which must be interacted with. But that's just what I think. Unless you want to do the paperwork, then this case is now closed. But I'll see you at the next scene, Ace. Like and subscribe.